In this video, we'll be talking about the different questions that they can ask in an interview and how you can prepare an appropriate and structured response for each and every single one of these. So the interview process can be nerve-wracking. Everything you do matters. The way you sit, the way you talk, and especially the way you answer. Although this can be anxiety-provoking, there are certain steps that you can take to make sure that you're as prepared as you can be. Now, the best way to do this is to prepare answers for all the questions that you know that will be asked in an interview. After doing a lot of research and asking different people about their interview experiences, I've compiled a list of common questions and tips so you can answer these as effectively as possible. Before we get started, I just want to say that if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, leave it in the comments section down below or add me at Instagram at Dr. Chala and I'll be sure to reply to your message as soon as possible. And if you found this content helpful, please leave a like and subscribe for more content like this in the future. Now, I've divided these questions into several categories: your introductory questions, your core questions, red flag questions, behavioral questions, and healthcare questions. And if you want to skip ahead to any particular part of this video, I've left timestamps down below. Now, let's start with your introductory questions. Now, these are just small talk questions, or questions that just initiate conversation. Now, these aren't necessarily questions that require a particular answer. You want to show the program that you can hold a conversation and converse with them. So it's important to be able to hold these small conversations and make small talk. Some common questions include: how was your day? How or when did you get here? Did you have a chance to visit the city? How did you hear about the program? Do you know anyone in the program? How has the COVID or social distancing affected your family or your life? Remember, it's good to maintain a positive outlook. Even if the answer isn't good, try to end with a positive note. Now let's get to the core questions. I've collected 8 questions that are asked in every interview, and here are tips that you should and shouldn't say for each question. The first question, and probably the most important question of them all, is: tell me about yourself. When you enter an interview, this is the first icebreaker question that they're going to ask you. Now, this is a very general and vague question, and you can answer it any possible way that you want. But a few things you should keep in mind is that your answer shouldn't be more than 60 to 90 seconds long. Try to be structured, comprehensive, but don't ramble on. So the way I personally like to structure this is by talking about where you're from, where you did your med school, any research, rotations, or any other significant work that you've done. You can talk about your future goals, personal strengths, and hobbies. Always end with something nice. You can end with: I'm thankful and excited for being here today. Feel free to mention any highlights that you feel are important. I did a research year at XYZ, or I graduated with honors. It's okay to restate things on your CV or personal statement. Most of the times, these programs interview a lot of applicants, and with that, they're not able to go into the tiny details of your resume. Now, this could be a good and bad thing. It could be good because you can direct the interview the way you want it to go. Remember, this is a quick summary. You don't want to make your answer more than 90 seconds long. And be sure not to fabricate or over-exaggerate things on your personal statement or CV. Now, this question is very simple, but it's very important to have a prepared answer because you don't want to be rambling on. The next important question is: what do you do for fun? Or how do you relieve stress? All these interviewers know that residency is quite the ordeal and there's a lot of work involved. And the rate of physician burnout is high. So they want to see that you have a good work-life balance and they won't have to deal with that with you in the program. Saying that you talk to family and friends when you're stressed is always a good answer. You can list out a few hobbies that you do, like you watch basketball or sports, or you play the guitar. And I've noticed that most of the time, this is how the interviewers remember you: the musician, or the record collector, or the guy that hates working out but does it anyway. Try to make your answers as unique as possible so that you can be as memorable as possible. The next question is: why this specialty? Now, be as sincere and authentic as possible. Most program directors hear a lot of generalized answers, and that's pretty much all you're gonna have to say as well. But try to make them as unique as possible by adding your own example to the whole situation. You can give it your personal touch by adding an interesting story that fortifies your points. You can give an interesting case or a personal experience that helped move you to make this personal decision. It's really important to be able to show your love and commitment to that one specialty. You don't want to make it look like you're choosing it just because. Whenever they ask you a question, you should always follow the rule of 3. Always try to give 3 points of why you want the specialty, and always back it up by a quick example. Now, these examples could be anything, including what you enjoy about the work, what you find rewarding, or what strengths you feel like you have that makes you a good fit for this specialty. Now, I've left a link down in the description below of different answers that orthopedic surgeons, family medicine residents, and pediatric residents gave to this particular question. The next core question is: what are your professional successes and failures? Now, this question is kind of hard to answer because most people kind of undersell their own achievements and they feel like it's very normal. But remember, you're at that interview for a reason. It's because you met the professional requirements requirements for that interview. It's important to sell yourself as much as possible and prove to the interviewer that you are a good fit for this program. But try not to be too overconfident, because this can be a negative at the end. So it's important to find that fine line between being humble yet being confident. Now I'll start with your successes. This could be anything from an interesting case that you've treated, to a small research publication, to a big accomplishment that you've made in your life. Now remember, it's not only important to state your successes, but talk about how it's impacted you. Now let's talk about professional failures. Now this can be a little bit tricky, because you don't want to say anything that negatively impacts you as a candidate. If you don't have anything that you have to say, just make something up small. It's very common for people to start worrying about their deficiencies in their resume, but remember, almost every person has at least one deficiency or the other. Let it be low scores, no research, no rotations, high YOG gap. When you talk about these failures, not only do you want to mention the failure, you want to talk about how you've identified the problem, tackled the problem, and how you've grown from it. Remember to sound confident. The interviewer's impression of you will be how you portray yourself. So if you start getting all defensive and worried, then the interviewer will think that they have something to worry about. But if you act confident and show that you've conquered it, then the interviewer will actually believe that. Now an example could be, my step 1 score wasn't as high as I wanted it to be. I've dropped significantly from my practice test scores, but I realized where I went wrong. I realized that being anxious during the test can really impact your scores, and I learned how to believe in myself and trust my own gut, and therefore I did so much better in my step 2. Now this may not be the answer for you, but this is how you should be structuring the answer. The next important question is, why this program? In a very recent survey with 1,454 program directors, fit with program culture was identified as the #1 consideration. So use this question as an opportunity to show the program that you are the right fit for them. Now answering this question properly involves a little bit of research into the program by going through their websites. Generally, the interviewers like to see someone who has a certain attachment to that particular program. This is because after they train the candidate for 3 years, they don't want to see the candidate go and practice somewhere else but in their own program. And this is why it's important to show your commitment to the program. You can lead with what jumps out at you about the value of training offered at that program. Let it be your board pass rate, research, fellowship, good patient population to learn from, or a good curriculum. Generally, within 20 to 30 minutes of an interview, you can easily understand what the program is proud about. So it's really good to restate this and say that this is what you really liked about the program. I remember at one of the programs that I went to, the program director was very proud of his evaluation system that he created. That's when I told the program that I really liked the evaluation system, because it's really important for a resident to be able to identify their own mistakes and move forward. And the program director really liked that. Geography is another important factor. It never hurts to mention that you have family or friends in the area and that you want to stay close to them, because it shows the program that you have more of a reason to stay right there. Also try to find out what locals are passionate about, and you can mention that you like that as well. Go through the program's website and try to find what's unique about their website. This could also include some research that certain faculty are taking part in, and say that that resonated well with you. Now let's come to the next question. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Let's start with strengths. Again, as I said earlier, it's important to find the fine line between being humble and being overconfident. This question can be asked in different ways. What qualities can you bring to the program? What sets you apart from other candidates? What qualities make you a good physician? Most people give the same generalized answers. I'm hardworking, I'm dedicated, I'm a people person, I'm enthusiastic about learning. While these are all great points, you want to be able to say the same thing and make it memorable. So it's important to try to give an example or a personal touch. Giving a quick example, an answer I used to give was that I'm really good at dealing with high volumes of patients, because having done my medical school in a rural area, patients from a 100-mile radius would come to our hospital to be treated. So at any given time, we'd have anywhere from 15 to 20 patients every single day. And this is how you want to structure it. You want to give your strength and give a quick example. Stay structured and stay to the point. Now remember to follow the rule of 3. Let it be strengths or weaknesses. You always want to give either 3 strengths or 3 weaknesses. Now let's talk about your weaknesses. This could be a little tricky because you don't want to say anything that negatively impacts your chances of matching into the program. Now when choosing a weakness, ask to follow the 3 rules. Has to be authentic, acceptable, and fixable. Now this may sound a little cliche, but try to choose a weakness that may be used as your strength, but try not to be too obvious about it. The next important core question is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or what are your goals for your future? Now the program generally wants to know how the program can fit into your grand plan. If you say that you want to go into academics, but the program doesn't have research, then the program wouldn't want to give you that position because they feel like they're not the perfect fit for you. This also involves a lot of research about each and every program and going through their website to see what they can offer. Now, it's okay to not know where you want to go and just say something like, I'm not sure where I want to go, but I'm very open to possibilities, and I believe that going through these rotations, I will find the right fit for me, or something along those lines. Now, let's say cardiology was your goal. You can emphasize it if the program has a good match rate, an in-house cardiology fellowship, or just has a lot of research. One common fear that programs have is that when you say cardiology, they'll think that you'll only come in, do whatever you need to do, and only focus on your cardiology cases. That's why it's important to emphasize that although you're going into cardiology, you believe that internal medicine is the core aspect of any physician, and your primary focus is to be a good hospitalist and attain the skills required to be one. Now, always keep a reason or an example of why you want to take a particular specialty. Again, it provides a chance for you to be unique so you can be memorable. The last core question is, what are you looking for in a program? With this question, I believe that going the safest route is the best option. If you accidentally say something that the program doesn't offer, automatically they'll think that the program isn't a right fit for you. You never want to put yourself in a position where the interviewer gets defensive. Now, if you say that you want research in a program, but they don't offer a lot of research, automatically they're going to get defensive. This happened to me in one of my interviews where I went to a university program and I said that I want to go into cardiology and therefore I need to do a lot of research. Being a university program, I assumed that they would have research, but they didn't. And the interviewer got very defensive and it didn't look really good on my part. Now let's get to the red flags. Remember, almost every single person has at least some red flag or the other. So don't be worried about your red flags. Most programs will ask you about why you don't have rotations, or why you don't have research, or why is your step 1 or step 2 score so low. Although it's okay, this is your one chance to give them a good reason of why you have this particular red flag. Now, some common questions may include, why is there a gap in your education? Or why do you have a failure or low scores? Now, this is a question for most international graduates because they end up writing their step 1 after their medical school, so they tend to have a gap. Now, remember, most people do have a gap, and programs know that this is a common thing amongst IMGs, so don't worry too much. But at the same time, you don't want to say you only study. Try to talk about sporadic things in your resume that you've done, or you've tried to collect. Maybe you've done some extra rotations, maybe you did an extra job. At the end of the day, if it's all you've done, try not to stay defensive and try not to talk about that point too much. Just be quick and move on. For low scores, you can talk about how you've learned from the experience and you've applied what you've learned in other aspects of your life. As I said earlier, I've learned to trust my gut instinct more. I've learned not to be so anxious. I've learned a better method to study. Now, many people ask me, I don't have research, is that a big red flag? And it really isn't. Not everyone has research, and it's not necessary for you to match into residency. However, it always does look good on your application. When they ask you about step 3, you can say that although you haven't done step 3, you plan on doing it soon. And that's all what program wants to hear, that you're thinking about writing it soon. If you don't have any USCE, you can simply say, I didn't have the opportunity or the time to do it or fit it, but I do plan on doing it within the next few months to kind of bridge that gap. Programs like to see that you're still going to be doing things after you submit the application and you just won't be sitting around at home. So it's good to always mention that you're going to be doing some rotations, some jobs, you're going to write your step 3 in that gap. Now, when answering any of these red flag questions, there are 3 rules you have to keep in mind. Keep it brief, stick to the facts, and stay positive. When I say keep it brief, you don't want to talk more than you have to. You want to talk about it and just move on so people don't focus or fixate on that. Stick to the facts. Try not to get caught up in the emotion of the situation. People don't want to hear excuses, but they just want to hear a good reason of why you did or didn't do something. You can actually make a red flag seem worse than it is by showing the program your negativity. So try to keep the bitterness or frustration out of the entire conversation. Last, you want to be positive. You want to show how that particular situation has made you stronger and a better physician. You want to talk about how you've learned from the experience, how you're a better, smarter, and a wiser physician because of it. But at the same time, remember, this is a red flag, so you don't want to seem too positive and completely dismiss it. Now let's come to the healthcare questions. These questions are intended to be anxiety-provoking and nerve-wracking, and they want to see how you answer under pressure. Also, they do want to see your perspective of the whole situation. And a common question is, how does the healthcare system vary from our country to yours? Remember, try not to be negative at all. You want to be positive on both aspects, but be objective. You can start by saying that you get world-class treatment in both the countries, but there are both pros and cons to each. For example, you can talk about how they do too many tests or surgeries in your country, and that creates a little bit of a distrust between the patients and the doctor. I'm from India, and if you're from India, you can say how the private sector plays a huge role in the healthcare system, how you don't need insurance, and healthcare is relatively affordable. You can also talk about how there are less handoffs, which decreases the margin for error and increases the continuity of care. Another question is addressing the physician shortage. And they can say, what can you do to solve this problem? I've been asked this question before, and when I was asked this question, I simply said that the best way to combat this is to increase the number of residency positions. It should be increased to a level where physician burnout isn't a thing, but at the same time a level where competition remains high, so the quality of physicians still are good. Again, this might not have been the best answer, but this was the answer that I gave, and they seem to like the answer. The question that most people get is, the cost of healthcare is very high, and what can we do to combat this? I've left a few articles in the description down below for you to read to properly be able to answer this question. I remember one of the questions I got was, we have one of the best healthcare systems in the world, yet why do our people keep getting diseases and the mortality rate so high? You can talk about how healthcare is quite expensive, or talk about the accessibility to people of lower socioeconomic status. Honestly, for these kind of questions, there is no right answer, so as long as your answer is quite reasonable, you should be okay. Other questions can include, what are your thoughts on how to combat COVID, or how do you think our healthcare can improve our response to COVID, or what do you feel are pressing issues in our healthcare system? To me, when I personally was asked this question, I talked about burnout and handoffs. And last but not least, let's talk about your behavioral questions. Now, behavioral questions are situations of how did you react to a certain situation, or how would you react to a certain situation. And there's pretty much one answer for all, and the answer is stay calm and communicate. Now, the question may be, how would you deal with a difficult coworker? And you could say something simple of taking it to the coworker, telling him your problems, and how it's affected you. And you can go from there. I left a list of common behavioral questions in the description down below. And if you have any other questions that you feel like you'd like the answer to, leave it in the comment section down below, or message me on Instagram at Dr. Chala, and I'll be sure to get back to your questions as soon as possible. And if you found this content helpful, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so I can make more videos like this for you. And while you're still here, check out some other videos on my channel. My videos are aimed to help IMGs with the entire USMLE process and help them match into residency. Good luck.